4 weeks ago, we started a series called The Long Way. And quickly, we have walked through what I can't recap this morning. We established this one central, important truth. Jesus is the long way. That there's no shortcut in faith, that's what we want. Like our mindset is, can we go back to the days where we just, every head bowed, every eyes closed, raise your hand if you want to say a prayer with me, and now we feel better about it. And that's the easy way. That's our American mindset. We invented that. The sinner's prayer invented right here in these United States of America. It's not in the Bible. It's not written anywhere. We invented it in the last 100 years or so. Like it's a new thing. Like up until then, like that was not the way that people decided, I want to be a part of Jesus. Like the invitation in the Bible is come follow Jesus. It's never say a prayer. But that's what our mindset does. We want shortcuts. We want to know, are we going to heaven or are we not? And the answer hopefully is we're going to heaven. And so how do I make sure I go to heaven? Let's raise our hand and say a prayer, and that makes us feel better about it. It's not biblical. You can't find it anywhere in there, but we've sold ourselves a lie. This idea of the long way is so counter-cultural to us. We want efficiency. We want a shortcut. But the more we actually study Jesus and we study the Bible, we come to a realization, it's just a long game. The whole thing. There are no shortcuts. The entire thing is the long way. And Jesus goes so far to say, I am the way, the truth, life. Nobody gets to the Father but through me. And so essentially, Jesus declares, I'm the long way. It is a long way, and I'm the only way you're going to get there. Now, the truth is, we have called this series The Long Way. And every single week thus far, I have said that phrase, Jesus is the long way. And maybe you haven't picked up on it just yet. But today, I'm going to make sure it's so clear. The series has been inappropriately titled in terms of what we're actually talking about, but appropriately titled to lead you on a journey, hopefully a long journey. This entire series isn't about a long way. It's about a name, Jesus. For 4 weeks, we have talked about the cross. I've been teaching in full-time ministry for 21 years now. I've never taught 4 weeks on the cross back to back to back, the in-depth way that we've done over the last 4 weeks. And when we first started thinking about the idea months and months ago, we started kind of walk through. I was like, I don't know if we can get 4 weeks of the cross. But the more I started reading and just praying through the story and the narrative of the cross, I was like, I don't know if 4 weeks is enough. And we're going to give it a shot this morning to close it out because we've got something pretty important happening 5 days from now. So let me take you back to where we started 4 weeks ago. Jesus saw it coming. Here's proof. Adam and Eve in the garden, we have this account of the moment when humanity falls. Genesis 3:6. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. God gave them one single boundary. Enjoy all of perfection. The one boundary is there's a tree, the knowledge of good and evil. You can't eat from it. That's it. That's your only boundary. And yet she looked at the tree, she learned about the tree, and she came to a conclusion. Because of what I think the tree is, my conclusion is this: God's holding out on me. He's holding out on me. And I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay that I deserve to know. I deserve to understand. I deserve. So when she saw that it was good for food, it met the eye test, it met the nutrition test, that it was desirable for gaining wisdom. She was like, wisdom is a good thing. This is awesome. Sign me up. This is what I want to do. She decided, God's not holding out on me anymore. She crossed the boundary. She invited her husband to do the same, and they did. That's Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. It only takes 9 verses for God to tell us his plan of how he's going to fix what they just broke. 9 verses later, the plan is in place. Let's read it together. Genesis 3, verse 15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. Now we're going to leave that up there because I'm going to walk you through it. If we just read Genesis in and of all alone by itself, it's difficult to understand what in the world is happening here. So I want to make sure we kind of walk by it almost word for word so we get a really good understanding. Let's begin with the I. And I will. Who is the I? That's God talking. So God says, I'm gonna do something. God makes a declaration. He casts a vision. He says, this is my responsibility. It's my authority. I'm in charge. I've made a decision and I'm about to take action. Eve, you've decided. Adam, you've decided. Satan, you've decided. Now I'm stepping in verse 15, 9 verses later, and he says, I've got a solution for what you have broken with your decisions about me holding out on you. I've already understood this is likely where it's going, and so I already have a rescue plan. I have decided to do something. What did he decide to do? To put enmity between two folks. Enmity, not a word we use all the time. We don't walk around like, man, the enmity in this office is through the roof. We don't say that. Enmity simply means active hostility. Active hostility, not passive hostility. Active hostility. So God says, I, as God, am making a decision, casting a vision, taking responsibility, showing initiative. I have a plan. And what is my plan? I am placing active hostility between two individuals. First, he says, you. He's talking to Satan. He's talking to evil in itself. I'm going to put active hostility between you and woman, between her offspring and yours. God is saying, you don't get a choice in the matter. I've already decided. This is my decision. This is what's going to happen. And then he gives 2 conclusions of this act of hostility. He will crush your head. You will strike his heel. So he's honest. He's like, all right, Satan, you've got some teeth. You've got some teeth. You can bite. You've got some fangs. You can do some damage. Not going to deny it. I allow it. I'm not going to neuter humanity. I'm not going to create this perfect world, this perfect padded white room world where there's no evil and no cause, like none of those. I'm not going to do that. Love is too much. Love is too much to whitewash everything for my people. I want them to have choice. I want them to experience real love. You can't do that if you're forced to goodness. So I'm not going to do it. You can have your teeth. And I'm going to tell you, you will try, but this is what it will amount to. You will strike his heel. In other words, you can do some damage. You might actually affect their walk. But he will crush your head. In other words, you might impact the way they go about their day to day. I don't know if any of you live in a place where you have some of them little Slytherin friends called snakes. I know some people say, hey, there's good snakes and there's bad snakes. I prefer to see them as dead snakes and alive snakes. And the good snakes are the dead snakes and the alive snakes are the bad snakes. That's how I see it. You do what you want to do. But if you happen to come across one of them snakes and you crush its head, the result of that is your life has come to a close, my friend. And so God says, I've decided to put active hostility between woman and her offspring and you and your offspring. And this is the result of the act of hostility. You will strike his heel and you will be successful, but he will end your life. And in Genesis 3:15, God makes a promise. a promise he fully intends to keep. It's the first messianic prophecy that we find in the Bible. It's the first mention of the promise of Jesus. It doesn't use his name, it simply tells the outcome of Jesus' life. A promise. Before humanity had a plan to get back to God, God had a plan to get back to humanity. He made a promise. He intended to keep it. It was an active promise. It was a promise of vision. It was a promise of movement. It was a promise of authority, a promise of responsibility. And it was God saying, I've got a solution to what you've already messed up. So let me walk you through the long way of the promise this morning. Begins with Adam and Eve. From Adam and Eve to Abraham, the promise becomes a people. Abram is how he starts. His name is changed to Abraham. Abraham is the first one that's called a Hebrew. And from his descendants, we then get the name Hebrews. He creates the family, the large family of God. There's a lot that happens in Abraham. Abraham has a son named Isaac. Isaac has Jacob and Esau, they're twins. Jacob, one of the twins, he gets his name changed to Israel. Israel, or Jacob, he then has a bunch of sons. One of them's name is Joseph. And Joseph is the guy that maybe you've heard of that has a coat of many colors, who's sold into slavery to go to Egypt because his brothers are jealous of him. But then he becomes the guy who grows up in slavery in Egypt, but ultimately begins to work for some pretty important people. Eventually gets an audience with the king or the Pharaoh himself, and presses him so much, saves his rear end in a famine, and gets promoted out of prison, out of servitude, into a place of authority in Egypt. Leads the entire people of God, the Hebrews, into a place called Goshen, right there in the Nile Delta, right around where it kind of fans out and gets really green, right there on the northern end of Egypt. And that land was given to the Hebrew people. Eventually they're enslaved. They stay for 400 years, and that gives birth to a guy named Moses. Moses shows up and he looks at Pharaoh, a prince of Egypt, and says, hey, let my people go. He's like, your people? Are you kidding me? These are my people. These are my people. And eventually God has enough, and he leads them out of slavery with a moment known in Jewish history as the Passover. That leads them to a Red Sea and a crossing that's a miracle. It leads them to the base of a mountain where Moses has a conversation with God, and God etches the 10 Commandments in stone, and he carries them down, and all of a sudden the people become a nation. And they've got laws and expectations and standards, and they begin to rise to them and meet those standards, and sometimes fail to those standards, but they're becoming something more than just a people. They're a nation. From Abraham to David, the promise becomes a king's lineage. Yes, we started with the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, these heads of families, these grandfathers, really, these wise men who would lead not just their family, but as the family grew, as the people of God grew, these patriarchs would lead this enormous amount of people through movements of God. But the patriarchs eventually get a little stale, and so the people ask for more leadership. And instead of just the heads of a family, a grandfather, he gives them judges. And the judges do a great job. They have lots of wisdom, and they make discerning decisions, and they lead the people through great victories and some really big trouble at times. But eventually the people get tired of judges and like, hey, we're the only kids on the block without a king. All the other countries around here, all the other nations got kings. Can we get a king, God? And God's like, why do you need a king? You've got a God. In fact, you've got the only God. Like, why would you need a king? Like, because all the cool kids have kings. And so he gives him a king, a guy named Saul. And Saul does a great job until Saul doesn't do a great job. He does a great job until Saul becomes full of himself and decides, I'm going to do things my way, not God's way. And so that gives way to a giant killing shepherd boy named David, who kills Goliath and then waits one of the longest times. After being anointed as king, he waits forever, years. And eventually he becomes the king of the Hebrews, who are now known as the Israelites, the people of God. Millions of them. Started from a little family, Abraham. hundreds and hundreds of years before. And under David, the Jewish people were like, this is what living's like. We got a guy who slays giants as a teenager, slays other giants in other lands, and he's a war hero. As a military strategist like they never seen. He's conquering things left and right, and the people of God are like, this is a promise fulfilled. And God's like, no, this is just part of the long way. David gives way to a son named Solomon. Solomon is known for his wisdom and a ladies' man. He got like 700 women. Not a good look for a man of God, by the way. But from Solomon, we get the temple, the center of Jewish life for generations. There, the Ark of the Covenant is housed. The most holy relic, the most holy moment, the most holy object that the people of God would. It held the 10 Commandments, manna given to the people of God as it fell in the wilderness when they wandered for 40 years. The staff that helped part the Red Sea and convince Pharaoh to let his people go, all of it there in the Ark of the Covenant, sitting in the Holy of Holies, the place where the presence of God would actually dwell himself. And once a year, one high priest, the high priest, got to go in on the Day of Atonement in the presence of God and sit there and sprinkle blood on behalf of the people onto the altar. And man, it felt like life is good. Promise delivered. And God's like, no, this is just part of the long way. So we go from patriarchs to judges to kings. And from David to the prophets, then the promise gets clarity. The prophets begin to unveil some details about what we should be looking for in this promise kept. They use phrases like the Son of Man, Jesus' own favorite way to refer to himself. They use a phrase in Isaiah chapter 53. They paint this picture of a suffering servant, a suffering Messiah. Words like rejected and pierced come into view. Even a place. We get clarity on Bethlehem in the age of the prophets. From the prophets to Bethlehem, the promise becomes a baby wrapped in strips of cloth, lying in a manger. There's a journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem at 9 months pregnant for a teenage mother. There's a band of angels that makes an announcement to shepherds in the middle of the night while they're minding their own business. No clue what's unfolding in front of them, just inside of the city walls that they were hanging out in the fields with. Promise keeps unfolding. Every chapter, something new. From Bethlehem to Jerusalem, the promise becomes a rabbi and a leader. Jesus grew up in Nazareth. It's a podunk town in the Middle East. People of the day would even refer to Nazareth as, can anything good actually come out of Nazareth? It was that kind of town. Jesus grew up a carpenter's son, became a carpenter himself. And at some point, he transitioned around the age of 30 from just being a carpenter to being a rabbi. A Jewish rabbi, a Jewish teacher. Now, when this took place, like, that's a stretch. Like, you don't just like do woodworking your whole life and then wake up one day and be like, you know what? I think I'm done making tables and chairs. I think I'm gonna go give this like religious leadership thing a try, you know? From Nazareth, by the way. But this is what he did. He's like, that's what I'm gonna do. And so he goes to the shore and he finds a couple of guys who are fishing. And he's like, hey, fellas, I think I'm gonna go start teaching. Would you follow me? And these fishermen are looking at him like, are you even you don't really look like a rabbi. He says, I'll teach you to be fishers of men. And for some wild reason, they drop their nets and get out of their boats and follow him. And it's not even, it's one of those moments when it's like, God, what are you doing? How is this even possible? Like, make it make sense. How do we get here? It wasn't just them, though. I don't know, he had this idea. I'm going to collect me a dozen of these guys. So he gets some more fishermen. Can't go wrong with guys who like to fish, right? Amen. But then he picks a tax collector. Boo, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you thinking, dude? Like, the vibe was great with the fishing guys, but you got to bring a tax collector into it. It's just this random group of guys. He picks a political zealot. For us, a political extremist is who he picks. Simon the Zealot, if you ever heard that name. A political extremist in the most extreme side of the overthrow Rome party. That's the guy. He says, hey, come follow me. And the guy says, yes. The guy's like, yeah, sounds like a good time. Let's go do that. Like, what? Like, this guy, he becomes a rabbi. He becomes a teacher and then collects this group of followers. And the guys that follow you, they kind of create a little bit of a resume for what kind of teacher you are. Like, if you've got the best and brightest students from seminary and they're all sitting and listening to you, it's like, man, he must be a good teacher. When they look at his group of followers, they're like, what a group of misfits. It fits for a carpenter who decided he wanted to be a Jewish rabbi. It makes sense. This tracks. And then all of a sudden, he begins to teach. And he messes this up. And his first big public moment, he stands in front of all these Jewish folks. And he says, I know you've been taught your entire life X, Y, and Z, but I want to change the standard today. Like, he says things like this. I know you've heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery. And everybody's like, yeah, we have heard that. Yep, taught from the very beginning. He's like, but I want to tell you, if you even look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart, bar raised. And I'm thinking, Jesus, this is not how we start. You know what I'm saying? Like, we gotta ease into this a little bit. We're not just like coming out like, guns blazing, raise the standard. Like this Jew, I don't know if you know this, Jesus, but the Jews have got a little bit of a storied history. They got a little bit of a precedent set when it comes to law, like a couple thousand years. Like, we can't just undo this in a sermon on the side of a mountain. You know what I'm saying? And then he keeps going. He's like, you've heard it said, thou shalt not murder. But I'm telling you, if anyone even looks at a man with hate in his heart, I was like, what? These expectations, these standards you're setting, you have lost your mind. Nobody's going to stay and listen until they do. In fact, they stay and they listen so many times, some of them forget to eat. It's getting late and they're so far away from where they live. And there's so many of them. His ragamuffin follower group, they're like, hey, Jesus, we got to let these people go to eat. You know, like, we can't be responsible for what's about to happen. Like, they haven't eaten all day. And he's like, well, you feed them. And he's like, bro, I can fish, but I ain't that good. You know what I'm saying? There's 5,000 people out here. You know what I'm saying? And so they start asking for volunteers in the crowd. And they're like, hey, anybody got some food we can kind of split up? And nobody offers anything except for one kid with like a Lunchable. They got five loaves of fish. You know, it's 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he's like, you can do this. You know what I'm saying? They bring it up. And they're like, oh, this is what we got, Jesus. You told us to do it. You told us to do something. This is what we got. And Jesus says, I will take what you got. He begins to pray. And before the night ends, every single person walks away satisfied. And he didn't just do it once. He did it once with 5,000, did it a second time with 4,000 people. People just keep coming. And there's one night that all his friends are on this boat and they're heading across the lake. And it's not a lake like we think. It's like one of them big old lakes, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you can't see those. It's a big lake. And they're out there, they're rowing, they're getting across, they're taking the shortcut home, and all of a sudden, it is wild. And they look out and they're like, there's a ghost out there. I can see a ghost. And then all of a sudden the ghost starts talking. It's like, bro, it's me, fellas. It's the Lord. And Peter's a really good friend. He was one of the fishermen, one of the first guys. Peter's like, oh yeah? He's talking to a ghost. He thinks it's a ghost. He's like, oh yeah, if it's really you, let me walk on water. What an idiot. What an idiot. Like, who says that, number one, to a guy you think is a ghost? Number two, even if he thought it was Jesus at the time, like, what do we do? What do you mean, let me walk on water? And Jesus says, get out of the boat. And Peter becomes the second man to walk on water. Jesus, 3 years, just keeps talking about this kingdom that's already here, the kingdom that's among them, but a kingdom that's not of this world. How does that make sense, Jesus? It's here, it's among us, but it's not of us? What are we doing? From Jerusalem to the hill outside the city called Golgotha, the promise becomes a Savior. Week 1, we started the series with when the time came for Jesus to return to heaven, he set his face resolutely towards Jerusalem. And we started with the premise that when it came time for Jesus to return to the Father, because he's the Son of God, he could have directly gone that way. Guys, it's been nice. It's time for me to go back to the Father. But instead, he decided to return to the Father by way of Jerusalem. And he knew that he did that because he understood what was waiting on him in Jerusalem. It was the long way to get to the Father, but it was the right way. And he understood the next time he goes back to Jerusalem, he would not walk out of it alive. And so Jesus finally reaches Jerusalem. It's on a Sunday that we know today in church history as Palm Sunday, which is this Sunday. It's a Sunday before Easter. It's a Sunday that's so different from the rest of the week. You see, Jesus kind of beats all expectations that he had set up because he gave his followers heads up. He was like, hey, this is what's gonna happen. I've gotta be beaten and rejected and despised, and I'm going to die. But when he gets to Jerusalem, they throw a parade. Like, everyone is so excited to see him. Like, people come out and they're like taking off their clothes and putting it down for him to walk over. And then they're taking leaves of these palm branches and they're putting them on the ground and they're shouting things like, Hosanna to the King. And it's like, this is not what it looks like to walk towards your execution. That's how the week begins. It makes sense that some of those people he fed, some of those people that he taught, that he challenged, that they were so excited to see him. We go from that Sunday and we fast forward just a few days. And Jesus is in a place, an upper room in a dwelling in Jerusalem. And it wasn't theirs, they had borrowed it. And they're there for a very particular reason. Not only did Jesus come to Jerusalem, most of the Jewish world had come to Jerusalem for a festival called the Passover, one of 3 pilgrimage festivals in the Jewish faith. And so this is one of the 3 times where everybody comes to the city. And so they had found a space to actually participate in this Passover meal. And the Passover meal, it goes all the way back, we were talking about it a few moments ago, to that moment when Moses shows up to free the Hebrews from slavery in Egypt, before the crossing of the Red Sea, before the Ten Commandments. And so the kind of the straw that broke Pharaoh's camel's back was a moment called the Passover. And I don't want to get into those specifics, but they remember that night with a meal and a festival. And so on this Thursday night, all Jews everywhere in the city and outside the city were gathered around tables celebrating the exact same identical meal. And not only is it identical for all families, they say the exact same thing. They sing songs, and it's verbatim, like it's line for line. It's very traditional. It's a ritual moment. It's incredibly worshipful. If you ever have an opportunity, if someone invites you to be a part of one of these, you should say yes. It's a really great spiritual experience to be a part of it. And so they go through the history of why they're celebrating this meal. And Jesus gets to the place, because he's the rabbi, he's the teacher, he would be the one leading through the specifics of the meal. And he gets to the place where he's got the bread and he breaks it. But what's different this time is he doesn't say what you're supposed to say, which they had been saying for 1,500 years as Jewish people up to that point. That's how long this road had gotten since Egypt and slavery had ended with Moses. 1,500 years. And so they've been doing this meal once a year, 1,500 times. They know how to do it. Everyone in the room, and however old they were, they have participated in the meal also with their own families that many times. So when he gets to the place where he breaks the bread and he starts to go off script, all the Jewish men, which is everyone in the room, looks at him and is like, this is not correct, Jesus. This is not how my dad did it. Not how granddad did it. But we're here for you. Just let us know what you're thinking. And he breaks it and he says, this is my body broken for you. Whenever you eat this, remember me. And then he takes the wine and he begins to share it. And again, he goes off script and he says, this is a new covenant, new promise. In other words, it didn't exist before, but now it's existing. This is a new covenant in my blood, poured out for you. Whenever you drink, do this and remember me. And they're like, okay. All right. And they wrap up their meal. And Jesus decides he wants to go and pray. So they had a connection with someone who had a private garden called Gethsemane. And so they went out of the city, Garden of Gethsemane, and there he began to pray. And he asked his friends that came with him, he's like, hey, will y'all just stay up? Will you just stay up and keep watch? And they're like, yeah, we got you, bro, we got you. And he goes over and he prays, and he comes back and they're all asleep. They are out. And he's like, fellas, look, I asked for one thing, okay? Just stay awake. And they're like, oh, yeah, we got you. Sorry, it's been a long day, man. It's been long. But I got you, we got you. And he goes away, they fall asleep. What they didn't know was they were missing a guy in the garden. They realized he wasn't there, but they weren't sure what he was doing. Maybe he had other priorities. I don't know. Maybe he was seeing family. But Judas had slipped out. And Judas had gone to gather the authorities to take them to Jesus. So it's the middle of the night, and I don't know what kind of noise a few hundred folks make walking outside of the city towards this private garden, but undoubtedly you could hear the footsteps coming. So Jesus hears them coming, and he walks out to meet them. He doesn't hide in the garden. He doesn't hop the fence and go running. He doesn't climb a tree. Jesus just simply finishes his prayer, and he walks out to the gate to meet the people who have come to betray him and arrest him. And he says, I'm your guy, and if you're here for me, let the rest of these guys go. And they arrest him. That begins a night of trials. He goes through 6, 3 religious and 3 civil, from the moment he's arrested until he's sentenced to death by crucifixion. the next morning. And it's early in the next morning. They are not going to wait any time. Immediately, they finish the 6th trial. They hand him over to the authorities, and they begin the process of crucifixion. You see, God had promised the long way, and Jesus took the long way. I mean, think about it. This is where we've been teaching out of. All the way back here. This is Luke 23. The last few weeks, this is where we've been. I mean, look, it's almost to the end of the Bible. Like there's not a lot there. This is where, let me see, what page is this? This is page 1355 for me. And it started, this might take a second, hold on. It started way back over here. You feel me? This is page 7, okay? So we're on page 1355, and the promise that Jesus is fulfilling started on page 7. If anybody doesn't think it's a long way, take it up with the 1,348 pages between page 7 and 1,355. It's a long way, believe me. This is where it started. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. And as Jesus was nailed to the cross, it was nearly time for the head crushing. And we don't get this insight, but what we know is that Satan from the beginning was like, let me derail everything that's godly or godlike. And so enter sin. And from then, just one thing after another, derailing the people of God. And they're in this huge cycle. You go through the history of the Jewish people, this huge cycle of like, everything is good. And then the sin enters the picture, like they begin to go off track. And the result of that is they become servants of someone, whether they're exiled or they become slaves or someone occupies their land, it sits there. And eventually they get sick and tired of it, and they eventually go back to God and they supplicate themselves, like so sorry. And the result of their supplication is salvation. And at salvation, it simply sits for a moment in time before sin shows back up, servitude follows, supplication is the result, back to salvation. And it's this huge cycle throughout the entirety of the Jewish people over and over again for the last 4,000 or 5,000 years. And so that entire time, Satan's just watching God's people. In his mind, he's like, they might be your people, but I'm surely the one plotting the course for them. And as Satan sees Jesus born, the first try is, if we go back to the birth story, the king of the Jews at the time, Herod, tried to get all the baby boys killed because he didn't want a new king of the Jews. He failed. That wasn't God's plan, Satan's plan. Satan tried to say, hey, I'm gonna snuff out what God is starting, the culmination of this promise, this long way promise, I'll put an end to it. He missed. As he grows up, he gets Jesus in the most podunk, non-resume town on the planet. He makes him a carpenter. There are no carpenters to become Jewish rabbis, by the way, except for one. And all of a sudden, Satan's like, I got this. He makes it all the way to 30 years old, and Satan's got to be saying, they got no shot. Yeah, the Son of God, he's sitting there in the flesh, but he's a nobody. And then as Jesus begins to pick his followers and choose his disciples, he's like, he didn't even get the best guys in Jerusalem. He got a bunch of guys that are fishing for a living and taking the Jews' money. And a religious extremist. Satan's just thinking the whole time I win. And then just as Jesus starts to get some momentum, as the crowds gather, as the water walking happens, as all of a sudden the Son of God becomes a little bit more prominent, Satan gets on the inside and convinces Judas to partner with him in selling Jesus out. And it works. And Jesus, the Son of God, is hanging on the cross, and Satan is popping the champagne. Like, I know God ain't finished, but we just took one of his best shots and look where it got him. That joker's about dead. Bring it, God. What's next? But then something crazy happens. Jesus is running out of air. He's been hanging there for a few hours. Crucifixion doesn't kill you with nails in your hand and nails in your feet. It kills you by suffocating you. And you try to pull up as much as you can, and that's why the nails are there, to make the pulling up painful. But eventually you can't anymore. And you try to pull up to get a breath, but eventually you run out of strength or the ability to withstand the pain, and you suffocate. It's agonizing. You don't suffocate quickly. It's not like drowning and you can't get anything. You just go from 100% ability to breathe, and slowly it just trickles down into where the body needs whatever minimum it is, and it just slowly happens over a long, agonizing time. Eventually, if they get so sick and tired of watching you slowly die, they'll break your legs with a club so that you can't even stand anymore, and all you have is the strength left in your arms, which at that time is nothing, and then it happens quickly. We haven't gotten to that point with Jesus where it's taken so long, but it is incredibly agonizing, and he's beginning to suffocate. And this is what takes place with a guy that's hanging to the right of him. Luke 23:39. One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." And all of a sudden, Satan's like, bro, we don't even got to heckle him anymore. The criminal is heckling him. Like, this is good. Like, remind him, aren't you supposed to be something special? Get yourself off the cross. Verse 40. But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said. "Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly. For we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Now that's when Satan probably is like, wait a second. You see, the thief on the other side starts yelling at the thief on that side and says, "Bro, can't you see what's happening here?" To which Satan the whole time is like, "I see exactly what's happening here. We're about to put to death the Son of God, and it's done." And the thief on the cross, though, he's like, "Can't you see what's happening here?" And Satan's like, "Wait a second, what is happening here?" And it's like, this guy, we're all in the same boat, same punishment, but you and I deserve it, and he doesn't. Now, I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us how this guy knew this about Jesus. We don't know if he was hanging out when Jesus came in on Palm Sunday. We don't know if he was a part of one of the crowds that Jesus taught, or maybe he saw a miracle. We have no clue how he came to this information. All we know is that he's a thief, and he's so much a thief, he's losing his life for it. But he has come to the conclusion, hanging next to Jesus, that guy's not like me, and he ain't like you, and he ain't like any of us. And that's when the little glimmer, this little piece of light, starts shining in the darkness. That thief looks at Jesus and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Wait a second. And Satan's like, "Oh, excuse me, fellas. You don't get kingdoms for being crucified. Like, there's not like that's not the prize. you get dead for being crucified. There's no kingdom at the end of this." But the thief, he's saying something different. The thief is saying, "No, I know a few things. I know there's a kingdom, and I also know it belongs to this guy. And I also know that he gets to decide who gets in." And all of a sudden, I don't know how you put the champagne back in the jar, but that's what's happening. Because Jesus turns his suffocating self to the center, to the left of him on the cross. And he answers him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. You see, the thief came to a really great understanding as his life was about to come to a close. And it's one that every single one of us must get to if we want to share in the same paradise that the thief did. And that's this: I can't save myself. I can't save myself. Now you might hear that. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's church, like we get it, that's church talk. Let me make sure I'm super clear to close the series out. So we started a journey 11 weeks ago. 11 weeks ago, we started walking. We didn't start calling this the long way until 4 weeks ago, but the entire thing has been together. 11 weeks ago, we started a journey towards Easter weekend. Yeah, you probably weren't paying attention to it, but our first series of the year was called Ingredients. And we talked about what are the 7 things the Bible tells us are essential to an ingredient list or a recipe that would give us a fully satisfied life in Jesus. And we walked through those in depth. Things like giving and Bible reading and prayer and serving, all those things, gathering, all of those pieces. And then we left from there and said, you know what? We're going to give you an opportunity to put these into practice. And so as soon as we finished explaining the ingredients, we started a 40-day challenge, which feels like a pretty big, long challenge, as we talked about the long way. And we've been talking about the long way for 4 weeks. Since you've been doing the challenge, we've been long way in it. And at the close, as we come to a close of that 40-day challenge here in just a few days, some of you will be convinced that the ingredients is what's changed your right relationship with Jesus. And if I don't make this abundantly clear, you would be wrong. Not just a little wrong, so far, absolutely, not even the same stratosphere wrong. That's how wrong you would be. You see, the church for so long has struggled with these 2 things and understanding the difference: earning versus hungering. You see, if we start to look at the ingredients as an opportunity to earn good standing with God, we missed it. If we see giving and serving and going to church and participating in community and all that, if we see that as a way to earn God's favor, we missed it. We missed it. You can't earn what's already been bought and paid for. It's a gift to you. However, there is the idea of hungering. It's why the first series of our year was called Ingredients and not Set of Standards. Standards might have actually been clearer, but ingredients will be clear to you today, because the idea is not for you to meet a standard of Bible reading. The idea is, would you hunger for it? Would you have a hunger that grows and develops inside of you, where you begin to understand the depth of the cross, which is why we did 4 weeks on the cross, hoping that maybe for some of you who have been walking in lukewarm Christianity, that you might awaken to the reality of, goodness, the cross is more than just a Good Friday. The cross is more than just something we put on a wall, which, by the way, is the dumbest thing for Christians to do. Hang it on your neck, put it on a wall. How about you walk with it in your life? We have given ourselves a pass on Christian t-shirts and Christian signs and Christian radio stations. And what we have failed to do is figure out how to be like Christ and how we go to work. You can take all the Christian relics out of your life and put them in the trash, and God could care less. But your life is what means something to him. But it ain't about you earning it. It's about you hungering for it. It's about you hungering to be different, not wanting to earn the opportunity to be different. And that's what we've got to solve. If we have a right view of the cross of Jesus, it changes our understanding of earning versus hungering. And all of a sudden, because we have a right view of the cross, we begin to ask ourselves questions. Why did God take such a long way? If only 9 verses after Genesis 3:6, he decided, I've got a plan. I decide to put enmity between you and your offspring and the woman's offspring. And you will strike his heel, and he will crush your head. I've decided that. This is what I'm going to do. This is how it's going to end. 9 verses later, why did it take him so long to fulfill the promise? That should bring a question. And that question should drive us to things like, why did he choose Abram? Why did he change his name from Abram to Abraham? I thought I heard that Abraham had another son named Ishmael. What's Ishmael's deal? Isaac had Jacob and Esau. Wasn't there a story about some soup and a birthright? And yeah. Joseph and his sons, or Joseph and his brothers, why were they so jealous of him? Where is the land of Goshen? Is there any physical, historical evidence that there were slaves in Egypt for 400 years? Is there any archaeological evidence at the bottom of the Red Sea that says that an Egyptian army attempted to cross it and didn't make it in the thousands? Is there any evidence anywhere that there are altars and pillars made as people of God crossed rivers and took new lands? Is there any historical evidence about a city whose walls fell in a single day called Jericho? If you understand the cross, you will be hungry to learn those answers. If you understand the cross, you will begin to realize just how powerful prayer is. If you understand the cross, you will realize you can never outgive God. If you understand the cross, being inconvenienced for the good of others through serving just becomes drinking water. But we've got to get the cross first, because it leads us to everything else. So I have 2 reflection questions for you as we close. Question number 1. This one you actually do not get to answer. It's been answered. But it's still a question you should be aware of. Question 1. Was the long way worth it? The reason you don't get to answer that is because Jesus answers it, and he answered it with his life. He said yes. But he didn't say it was worth it. He said you are worth it. Question 2. Now this is a question you get to answer. Is the long way worth it? This one's yours. The long way runs through your Monday, by the way. It runs through your marriage, your anxiety, your forgiveness or unforgiveness. It runs through your obedience or disobedience. My opinion is that it would be worth it for you. But I can't answer that for you. Just like one thief couldn't answer it for the other as much as he wished he could. So what long way walk with Jesus have you been putting off or avoiding? What obedience have you been delaying? What conversation have you been putting off? What forgiveness have you been resisting? What step have you been calling not yet? But Jesus would call, that's following me. Maybe you should take a step towards the long way today. You know, my hope as a pastor 3 months ago was to get our entire church ready for Easter in a way that you've never been ready for Easter before. That every single week, and I know it's hard to be here each week because life, but every single week we took one single small step towards this coming weekend. Every message, every song, every challenge, every page in that book, every video, every bouncy ball, all of it was curated and thought through. How do we take people on a long way journey of 3 months to get you spiritually ready to celebrate the most significant historical event in the history of humanity? Friday night is not just a church event. It's an opportunity for us to declare the significance of the cross in the most common ground place in the county of Coweta, the historic square where we will shut down the street and we will talk openly about the significance of Jesus and the cross. And we will openly admit how sometimes the church gets in our own way, but we will make this so abundantly clear on Friday in a way that people who have yet to decide, I want anything to do with church, would engage. And that is not done with staff. That is done with people who are prayed up and spiritually read up and are ready. So, and just even presence in the moment, being there, praying for the people who are disconnected, praying at home if you can't, like all of the things that we would be ready to take on some responsibility for the burden of people who are close to our community but far from God, and that we would take some ownership of it. And they would turn around 48 hours later and have one of the greatest celebrations of the resurrection of Jesus that only happens because of the long way. Where we will ask one of the greatest questions recorded in literary history: why do you look for the living among the dead? And there's a really good answer for that. Church, it is my hope and prayer that you are ready. And it is never just another Sunday. But Easter weekend, there are so many people that will give God a shot for the first time in so long. It would be irresponsible for us not to be ready. So as we take communion together, that's my question I want you to sit with. Where am I delaying? Where should I take a step? And am I ready? Am I ready for Easter? Is my heart ready? Is my mind ready? Is my time ready? Is my mindset ready? Are you ready?